All right, here we go. June 27th, 2024. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live. Thanks everyone for hopping in. Good numbers already here within the first 30 seconds. It is NHL Draft Week. The Stanley Cup has been awarded. The offseason is officially here. If you're watching on YouTube, the schlub on the left, that's me. Hi, I'm Chris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects. On location in sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, not looking sweaty. That is Matthew Fairburn, Sabres beat writer for The Athletic. The Athletic has a pretty good deal going right now. We did check. $1 a month for the first year. Get in on that deal. Read everything that Matthew's been cooking up this week out in Vegas. And of course, all throughout the season. I like The Athletic. That's well established. I do a commercial for The Athletic free of charge every week on the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. MLB, MLS, UFC, NFL, NBA, the alphabet soup of sports. They're all covered there at The Athletic. You can find it. Just type in The Athletic. All right. Matthew, before we begin, also, as people are tricking in, I'm going to tell the audience to like this video, hit the like button. Subscribe to the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show here on this YouTube channel. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could, please leave a 5-star review on tonight's show. Matthew and I will get into some news and notes, including an update on the Jeff Skinner situation. Old friend Casey Middlestat signed an extension with the Colorado Avalanche. I think we'll get into that for a little bit. Kevin Adams had some media availability today at the lovely Wynn Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. I think we might want to get into that because I think the Sabres there's a lot to talk about there. We've already covered it on the past 2 episodes. Fans of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show that are here every week are aware of that. If you're new to the show, go check out those past episodes. And then, of course, we will review the prospect pipeline and get into some draft talk. The draft 24 hours from now will be happening out there at the Sphere. A lot to talk about there. Sabres made a move today, moving back a couple spots. We'll get into that. But Matthew, you're not sweating. What's going on in Vegas?
Not right now.
Tell the audience about it. Yeah.
We had some behind the scenes. Chris and I had some discussions about, ideas when I'm out in Vegas. Maybe I'll do the show from, out on the strip somewhere, give people a nice backdrop and get creative with it. But I spent a couple minutes outside today and realized that was not going to be a logical thing to do in this 110-degree heat. I did take a walk from my hotel to the Wynn to, for Kevin Adams' availability. It was about a mile, and it was toasty out there. So here I am in my comfortable, climate-controlled hotel room, ready to talk some Sabres. It's a busy time here for the Sabres, and getting to be crunch time for Kevin Adams in his biggest offseason yet as general manager. So the next 5 days, I think, are going to tell us a lot about who he is as a general manager and what the Sabres are going to be as a team this upcoming season.
Yeah, we should probably talk about that, I guess. So Kevin Adams met with the media that was assembled today in Vegas. And, we don't need to beat the dead horse too much on the Jeff Skinner thing, but it seems for me, just listening in, I wasn't there, obviously, like many of our audience, I'm sure we were dialing up Twitter and listening to Kevin Adams speak about a lot of these topics, some vanilla, some a little more, maybe, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say he was loose, but he was definitely seemed frustrated on a couple fronts. We can get into that, but the Jeff Skinner topic just won't go away. So the buyout window actually opened, I believe, today, right? And it closes on the 30th, correct?
At 5 p.m.
So were you expecting a move already? Or because here's the thing. It seems like when he met the media, well, they were still in Buffalo before they left for Vegas. It was kind of like, look, we're exploring all options. He kind of played a little more straight. Today, I don't know if you're feeling what I'm feeling from him, but it sounds like Jeff Skinner's probably not going to be a Buffalo Sabre much longer. Am I reading this right?
It doesn't sound that way to me. And, it was an interesting back and forth today compared to a week ago because, like you said, he was steering clear of specifics and playing some good defense while he was still in Buffalo. But today, and he also went on Sabres Live with Marty and Duffer, and he did allude to a few trades that he thought he was going to get to the finish line that fell through. And so today I asked him
You
in
axed him?
I it was a long flight last night, so you gotta give me a little slack here. But I asked him about whether Jeff Skinner seemed open to the dialogue on whether to waive his no trade clause, and he just said no. Pretty much straight up no. That does not seem
Shocked
like
that
something they're interested
yeah.
in. And I was surprised, honestly, that he was just that blunt about it. I asked the question because you have to ask the question and you don't know what the answer is going to be. But that, to your point, spoke to maybe a little bit of frustration. Maybe there have been some interested parties in making a deal with some salary retention, which seems like it would be the preferred option. I say that because not because it's necessarily a dramatically better financial picture, though I think it is a little bit better. You get 4.5 in savings for 3 years and you don't have to pay the final 3 years or the 6 years that you would have to pay on the buyout. But you do have to pay the full freight, and on the buyout you pay 2/3 of the cash, which I think is always a relevant discussion here in Buffalo.
Mhm.
But I don't necessarily blame Jeff Skinner for not waiving the no move clause either, because I'm just surprised that it's a complete non-starter for him for a couple of reasons. One being that he gets more money if he stays on his current contract and it doesn't get bought out. He would get all of the money from, a couple different teams. But that's where I think if there was a team that he liked that came along, that's something worth entertaining. But it seems important to him to be picking his spot here. If he's not going to be playing in Buffalo where he's comfortable, that he gets to choose and maybe take a discount to play somewhere that he really wants to play. So I was a little bit surprised that some of that frustration seeped through. And also, if you know that that's the answer, what are you waiting for? Because the window closes on Sunday. Maybe you're hoping he has a change of heart. Maybe you're playing some hardball. You could have another window to buy him out if you take one of your RFAs to arbitration. That's the only other time that a buyout window opens. But in this case, it seems like it's either Sunday or you don't do it. And at this point, it would be awkward to bring him back, I think, because Kevin Adams, in addition to saying what he said about the no movement clause, brought up about Jeff Skinner. He's been an elite goal scorer in this league, but if he's not on your top line, where do you put him? That sounded to me like what Rod Brindamore was saying about Jeff Skinner after he shipped him out of Carolina, right? You have to play him with certain types of players. How does he fit? That could be as much a Lindy Ruff thing as anything else, but interesting situation to monitor here over the next couple of days.
Yeah, I was thinking about Skinner a little bit more today, and it's like, trying to figure out where, because I just think the writing's on the wall. Obviously, like if he's not going to play in your top line, and they're almost saying that, then yeah, he's gone. Like no chance to even compete for the job, right? And Detroit, doesn't it smell like Jeff Skinner's going to be in Detroit? That's my
Detroit,
feeling.
Toronto, maybe.
I
Clinton
feel
had a question here. Wouldn't he get more money if he was bought out and signed a new deal? Potentially, but he gets two
maybe.
thirds gets 2/3 of the remaining salary. So he would need to basically make up that third of
Mhm.
the 22 million that's left on his contract, which is about 7 million. So if you think, you know, that's where I say if he gets bought out, I don't think he's making up that difference, but I don't think that really matters to him at this point, given um, how much money he's made and the fact that he's never played in the playoffs. So I think playing for a contender is probably important to him at this point if he's going to move. And the teams that probably were willing to absorb the contract and maybe get an asset out of it are the teams that Jeff Skinner would not want to play for, San
Yeah.
Jose or, so stuff like that. Chicago would probably have some interest, you would think. as they
Mhm.
try to get some more talent around their young players. It's odd to me that it's dragging on, I guess, at this point, because the longer it drags on, the more awkward it gets if he comes back. So maybe there's part of Kevin Adams that's holding out, not knowing what other business he's going to be able to get accomplished in the next 5 days, or really the next 3 days, because the buyout window ends on Sunday. So we'll see, but I'd be surprised if he's a Buffalo Sabre at this point.
Yeah, that's the assumption now. So, Kevin Adams, the job of remaking some of the forwards,
We've got
and
some
line
breaking
combinations.
news here,
What do we
Chris,
got here? What do we got?
which is relevant to our discussion tonight. Not Sabres news, but the Washington Capitals announced that they have acquired forward Andrew Mangiapane from the Calgary Flames for a second-round pick in the 2025 NHL draft. So some movement there. If
Scratch them off your list.
a 2025 second-round pick was all that Mangiapane cost, that's a bit of business that the Sabres could have got done. Mangiapane did have, I believe, an 8-team no-trade list. I bring him up because earlier this week at The Athletic, I sketched out the Sabres offseason, did all how I would put together the roster, and Mangiapane was sort of my big swing. And I had the deal as Krebs and a third-round pick for Mangiapane. I'd say he went for even less than that, I would say. Or right around that, maybe, similar value. But that is a significant move, I would say, in terms of relevance to the Sabres as we talk about what type of business they'll be able to get done the next few days. Mangiapane has a $5.8 million cap hit. It is not clear in this announcement if there's any salary retention, but $5.8 million for one more year. He's 28 years old, played on a line with Dylan Cousins at the World Championships. I really loved that fit for the Sabres as a reclamation project, but he is off the board.
Former Barry Colt, Andrew Mangiapane. It's a good pickup for Washington for sure. And it's kind of relevant. I mean, yeah, relevant in this discussion, relevant of the segue that I was making also, because with Skinner seemingly exiting the Sabres, it creates more work that Kevin Adams has to do to kind of reshape and revise his forwards. And there was a little bit of news in the rumor mill about maybe a potential replacement. I don't know if it's a replacement for Jeff Skinner or a replacement for Casey Middlestat, who, by the way, signed a 3-year, what was it, $5.75 million extension with the Colorado Avalanche. You and I were talking last week, and, now keep in mind, it was probably early in the season. We brought up the potential of Casey Middlestat being dealt. Started having a really good season. I think that a lot of Sabres fans weren't understanding maybe the thought process behind that. And it's kind of interesting because when you start, doing these off-season exercises and putting together a shopping list, whether it's trade targets, UFA calls you're going to make, whatever. I mean, maybe a prospect to fill some roster spots, you realize the gap that it really created by moving Casey Middlestat out and bringing in Bowen Byram. So when it comes to now, a lot of it was around money. A lot of the thought process for Kevin Adams moving him out would be, how much money is this guy going to want? 3 years, $5.75 million, pretty manageable if you're the Buffalo Sabres. My question for you is, does this change? Does this deal, that Casey Middlestat just signed with Colorado, kind of change your thought on the trade? You got to keep in mind what they got in return. And also, I'll throw the question out there: would he have signed for 5.75 million in Buffalo, or would it? I want your thoughts on that too, because we can't just sit here and make that assumption.
That is the big point to make up top. Is 5.75 per for 3 years on a bridge. Is he going to do that in Buffalo? It doesn't even sound like the Sabres went down the road, though. So I'm not going to give Kevin Adams a pass and assume that Casey Middlestat wouldn't have taken that type of deal. Would he have taken it in August? Maybe, right? Would he have taken it in September, as you were handing out some of these deals? I don't think they really went down that road. So does it change how I view the trade? A little bit. I still think the bulk of my take was that the upside you have in Bowen Byram is a lot harder to find than what Casey Middlestat brings as a third line center. That is not to say that Casey Middlestat's departure has not left a pretty sizable hole in Buffalo's lineup, but I do like Byram, the player, and the potential that he has to become, a big time defenseman in your top four. But I was also operating under the assumption that Casey was playing his way into a contract north of $6 million.
Yeah, man.
So I think the fact that he's under 6, that would have been a pretty good 1-2-3 punch down the middle for the next few years as you wait for, because the other thing we brought up in the trade discussion was that handing him a long-term deal was going to be tricky because you have these other guys that are going to be pushing for ice time. Well, if it's a 3-year contract, then you're kind of lining up nicely with when Noah Ostlund, might be ready. And he's still tradable on a 3-year deal at 5.75. So it's not like there was a hard deadline on it, but getting a player like Bo Byram, you might not have gotten that. That's not always going to be available to you. So I'm still okay with the trade. I still think it's one that is very much a time will tell type of situation, but Middlestat, I feel like we know what he is in the league, and I don't think we know what Bo Byram is quite yet.
Yeah, and I think of Casey Middleton. I mean, I like his compete level. I liked his playmaking ability. I think that he got better, protecting the puck, managing the puck. He was, fewer turnovers as he matured as a player, but also very replaceable. Right. And that's ultimately where I land, where I understand the deal to this point. I do think that maybe the opportunity to win in Colorado factored into that pretty fair cost, and what, Colorado's gonna be paying him, where I still think it probably would have had to cost Buffalo maybe a little bit more. And not only that, I think Kevin Adams also might be prone to getting taken advantage of by agents too. And they could have squeezed out another couple hundred grand per season. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here on that. I mean, he's
Well, I
still
mean, you look
new
at
to the job.
yeah, I mean, you look at Rasmus Dahlin getting 11 when
Yeah.
I think 12 months ago, 10 was looking like a number that's
Mhm.
kind of where I had him pegged. And
Owen Power.
Owen Power gets, north of 8 coming out of his entry level deal when, there wasn't necessarily a rush there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a good point by you that can you say that, Middlestat's agent might have been able to squeeze the Sabres for more because of a few different factors. And that's where these next few days become interesting because it's
Mhm.
trade negotiations, right? And Kevin Adams is going to run into a lot of probably no trade clauses, no movement clauses that players don't want to come to Buffalo. Well, that's partly his own fault. It's this is his 5th season as general manager, and he hasn't made the playoffs. So winning is a big part of why players do not want to come to Buffalo, especially in hockey, where a lot of guys are from Ontario. Like there's, winning is the main reason. But then you're also going to have, if you can't pull off a good trade, a good hockey trade, then you're going to be sitting in a spot where you're negotiating with free agents.
Mhm.
And what type of Buffalo bonus are you going to have to pay these guys on the open market to convince somebody to come here? And that's why in my, off-season projection article, some of the numbers probably didn't look, great, like a 1.5 for Ryan Lomberg, maybe is a little jarring, but if you're convincing Ryan Lomberg to go from South Florida as a Stanley Cup champion to Buffalo, you're going to have to throw in a few extra hundred thousand, right? I think
Yeah.
this is a massive offseason for Kevin Adams, not just because of how much business they have to handle, but because this is the hard part about being an NHL general manager. Trading guys when you're backed into a corner, like, Jack Eichel and Rasmus Ristolainen and Sam Reinhart, and tearing things down is simpler. This
Mhm.
part is difficult. And had he done more last summer, this wouldn't be as difficult. But now he's in a spot. Brian Cummings, one of our all-star chatters, sent a
What's
tweet
he
to me
saying?
that it
Oh,
was
tweet. Okay.
something to the effect of, the Kevin Adams has left himself a 60-foot downhill hard breaking putt when if he had, laid up or chosen a different club, last summer, maybe he's looking at a 4-foot putt. Hell, maybe he's looking at a 10 or 12-foot putt, still a heavy lift, but a manageable putt. Now,
Higher make percentage. Yeah.
right now, it feels like he is going to have to he has a lot of business to handle. That was probably the number one takeaway I had from trying to sketch out this offseason and put together what the roster would look like. Is, man, if you want to build a roster that you're happy with, you're going to have to make a lot of moves.
Yeah.
So can they get all that done? That's a long way to go from the Casey Middlestat topic. I know we went down a different road here, but it's part of it because by trading him, you made more work for yourself. By buying out Jeff Skinner, you would do the same thing in a manner of speaking. So there's a lot to accomplish here. Over
We
the
had to
next few days.
go that long way though, because I don't think we can talk about the player that we want to get to here without calling out the gap in that middle of the lineup, middle six center position that was created by moving Middlestat. And that's where I was going. I think that, you're starting to see reports that the Sabres are in on Marty Necas from Carolina. And a young player, same draft class as Casey Middlestat, by the way, taking just a few picks after Middlestat. That was 2017. And my theory, because we saw him play a lot of wing last year, right wing in Carolina. We were looking at some of his numbers before this, right? Love the shot generation, a lot of shots from the house. He was in kind of that Jake Gensel range in terms of, over 10 shots on goal per 60, shot attempts per 60 were amongst the leaders of Carolina's forwards. But even though he played a lot of wing, I would think that Kevin Adams would want to bring him in to play center. And that's why he's looking at him. What's your just kind of read? Are you hearing anything, number one? And just what's your read on that? Because I think the acquisition cost is going to be fairly high. And maybe the goalposts have moved a little bit from maybe what Carolina thought they could get for him versus what the Sabres are going to put into play now. You're definitely putting, first rounder at a minimum in play here for this player. 25 years old, over 20 goals, right? What do you have, 24 last year? I like the player. Speed, very skilled. And I think he might play a little more complete of a game than a lot of people realize.
I think so too. Defense is not his strength necessarily, and it's hard to extract completely when you're playing in such a solid system as Carolina does.
Yeah.
But we were looking at the numbers before we went live, and this is a guy that has hits at a similar level to your Tage Thompsons and your Alex Tucks. He takes more hits than those guys do. So a guy that's, involved and he gets to the net. A lot of his shots come from, right in front of the net. He does pretty good work there. And if you're losing Jeff Skinner is not a dominant like net front player, but he's slippery in front of the net. I think a lot of his goals come that way. So
Side of the net. Yeah.
yeah, like you kind of want, to replace some of that offense. To set the table for this conversation, Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic had an interview with new Hurricanes GM Eric Tulsky earlier this week. Within that story, Pierre had also, put some of his rumblings that he's hearing, and the team he singled out with serious interest, was the Buffalo Sabres. And I think it was interesting today that when that was brought up to Kevin Adams, he quickly said, I would prefer it not be out there in the media.
Yeah, that's
Which,
not a denial.
well, it was almost it was pretty close to a confirmation, it felt like.
Yeah.
But it was also a weird dig at, another general manager, seemingly. unless it's a dig at Pierre LeBrun, but Pierre LeBrun's just doing his job.
No.
Either the agent or the GM, wherever Kevin Adams presumes that came from. But, you know, it just struck me as unnecessary if you're trying to get business done. But like you said, not a denial, felt like a confirmation. And the centerpiece to this is interesting because, to your point, the acquisition cost, number one, is going to be substantial, I would
What you
say.
would pay for a centerman.
Sure, like a first round pick at least, and
Yeah.
probably more, given the
Yep.
player, the age, team control, all those factors. So maybe, Carolina is open to futures being involved. So maybe a prospect, first round pick, maybe one of those second round picks. Maybe that's why they acquired that pick from the San Jose Sharks to make a move like this one. Maybe not specifically this one, but if you're doing that, you got to have a vision for this guy in the top 6 of your forward group, I would think, right? So that means, we were talking about this as I was heading back to the hotel, trying to figure out how the lines would all come together, right? Do you put him at center and move Tage Thompson to the wing?
I would.
Do you put him at second line center and make Dylan Cousins your third line center? The other part is, what do you pay him? Because we had up AFP Analytics, Rochester-based AFP Analytics, who has been pretty spot on with some of their contract projections already early on here in this free agency offseason window. They have 2 projections for Marty Necas.
Yeah.
The
I
first
like
is
one better than the other.
the first is a long-term one that is 7 for 7.5 per year. The other is a short-term one that's 3 years, 6.2 million per year. Either way, pretty big number, right?
Mhm.
A guy that you're committing to for the next handful of years to be a piece that you're trying to build your offense around. So that would constitute a major swing to me. That would be probably, of guys that are realistically available, that might be the biggest swing you could make on the trade market this summer. I don't know that we're going to see a bigger name than that move. Maybe we will. There's always surprises thrown in there. I know the pie in the pie in the sky dream is Brady Tkachuk, right? I don't think he's moving.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Pavel Buchnevich is another one, I guess, but he's a little bit older. As far as like younger guys entering their prime, this might be the biggest swing you could take. So it's noteworthy that they're pushing for it. And it's also, the tying it into the Mangiapane news, you're, in addition to looking for guys that are team controlled, maybe cost controlled to an extent, doesn't apply here, but guys that don't have no movement protection, right? It's a big problem. I wonder, I think Mangiapane had an 8-team list, I believe.
Yeah.
And I wonder, if the Sabres were on it. I mean, at that price, you got to think that they would have been in on that. And now we talked about this because last time we did a show, the Capitals had also made a pretty big trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's a team that was in the playoffs last year that is actively trying to get better.
Yep.
Where is the playoff spot for the Buffalo Sabres? Like, this is why the next few days are so big.
I bring up the Necas thing for, I guess, a couple of reasons. We've seen him play right wing. I recall him playing some left wing, also off wing. The centerpiece is interesting. He might want to play center. It gives you, well, number one, Yuri Kulik would be absolutely pumped, don't you think? Have a
Yeah,
fellow countryman here.
he
Okay, and
doesn't
it gives
have
you
one other
insurance.
than Lukasz Rusek.
And Rusek,
Uh,
and
and
it gives you a little insurance if Kulik can't come in and be a centerman, like a third line centerman next year in the NHL. Kind kind of interesting. The only problem I have with it is the age of the player, because I'm on this track where you got to get older. You want more experienced guys. At the same time, can't argue the skill, can't argue the pace that he plays at, can't argue the playmaking, everything that he does. His metrics are good when you dig in. On a good team, certainly helps. But I guess Kevin's not full of shit when he says he's in on a lot of the conversations. If he's like, and Pierre's kind of, and he's not denying it. I didn't expect it, I guess, in a way, just because, well, first of all, we thought that it's going to take more than futures prospects picks, like, right? Like we thought
I
Carolina
think that
actually
was
wanted some.
the initial reporting around this whole situation was that Carolina wanted, a proven player back. But,
Mhm.
the market's the
Could I
market.
interest you in a Henry Yoki-Haru?
The market's they are potentially going to lose a couple of defensemen. So
Yes.
that is,
Yes.
that is a thought. But it's one of those things where once the market says what the market is on a player, you have to pivot, right? And this is
Mhm.
another, new GM. Not that Kevin Adams is a new GM, but lacked experience coming into the job. So interesting to see these two involved in one of the biggest, possible, potential deals here. I mean, I'm trying to think of who else might get moved this summer that could be a bigger name at forward. And I don't know if I can think of one off the top of my head.
I can't, at least with the upside anyways. Again, still a young player, hasn't fully hit his stride yet. Took a step back, right? We were looking at his power play production got cut in half. Last year, I think he went from 26 points down to 13 points on the power play. So he
Ice
saw a
time on the
reduced
power
role
play
there.
took a massive dip as well. So
He had ice time on the power play, took a dip. Overall ice time, I think he played
yeah,
a minute less per game overall last year with Carolina. So definitely some things to consider. Guy like that would certainly, I think, embrace the opportunity of being here. But yeah, I keep thinking about that Kulik thing too. It'd be kind of cool for him to just have a little. Those Czechs seem to really like each other,
it
just
would
like the
be
Finns do, just like the Swedes
he
like each other.
yeah, he doesn't have a lot of fellow countrymen in the organization, and they're going over there,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, they are, aren't they?
in October. So Clinton does point out a couple of big names that could be on the move: Reinhardt, Stamkos, Mitch Marner would probably be the biggest trade chip if he
Mhm.
actually got moved. The other two are free agents, but certainly some names. But this is among the biggest on the
Yeah.
trade block. So you look at all those trade boards, and he's right up near the top. As far as caliber of player, and it feels like one because of the no trade protection that he doesn't have any. It becomes a more realistic target, I think.
Well, we're 30 minutes in. I haven't really been looking at the chat, been focused on this conversation with you. I'm assuming that the chat is kind of compelled by this trade news potentially. Um, Calgary, going back to that Mangiapane thing, it sucks because, I went back and I was looking at, Coleman. I think I said last week that he had a 10-team no trade that kicks in the league year, but he also has a no move right now. But I'm just sitting here saying, man, they're open for business. Call, beg, see
Well, I
what's up.
mean, so
Beg him to come. Beg
here's
him
the
to come.
interesting thing about the Mangiapane trade to me was at his cap hit, the way he's played, he's not exactly a super high value asset in this current moment, and the trade reflects that, right?
Mhm.
But if they could have held on to him, maybe he plays better early in the year, and you trade him at the deadline. Prices sometimes go up at the deadline, and you get a little bit more. So the fact that they got a pick that's not even this weekend and did the deal now makes me think that they're more open for business
They're
than
clearing.
even previously thought, because there's been some talk out of Calgary about that they don't want to go full rebuild, that maybe they want some of these guys still in place, but Coleman is the slam dunk type of target if you could get him, and you would have to convince him. he is a Plano guy, Plano, Texas native. So maybe I think he's a little too old to have been there when Lindy Ruff was leading the Stars, but I don't know. Maybe Lindy Ruff changes the calculus on some of these no movement clauses, no trade clauses. But frankly, I think that's a little bit of wishful thinking. Think it's going to change too much because you're talking about a team with some major reputational damage to undo that they have not. The last 12 months did not help them. I think they were on the right path a year ago, and this season did not do much to help them in that regard.
Maybe he likes wings. Maybe he likes wings. All right. So, Matthew, let's talk about the draft. Let's talk about what's going on here. Sabres moved back today, made a deal. So coming into the draft, Sabres now have 9 picks. We need to call out that Kevin Adams probably personally sent a thank you text to Kyle Okposo for contributing, 2 assists in that cup run, like 16 shots on goal to helping them get a 5th round pick out of that deal. So yeah, the Sabres will come into tomorrow with 9 total picks. So after today's deal with San Jose, where they move out of 11 back to 14, they pick up 42 in the process. They now have 3 picks in the first 43. So they're 14th overall, 42 and 43 in the second round. Then they have 76 in the third. Another set of back-to-back picks, which is real fun for media types, at 108 and 109 in the 4th round. Picking at 161 from Florida, 172 and 204 in the 6th and 7th rounds. So interestingly enough, I think moving back kind of plays right into something that I was thinking that the Sabres might be looking at, or at least a player if they keep the pick at 14. That makes a lot of sense. It may have been, I don't know, is it a reach if you pick them 3 slots earlier than maybe many would be thinking about this player? But we should talk about, I think, let's just tee this up a little bit. I was looking at, the prospects today, as I do often. Think about them way too much in my life. But I just wanted to call out a couple things, I guess. So, overall, I think that there's, I guess rightfully so, the Sabres are pretty strong group of forward prospects. But when you really dig in, is it really strong? Right? I think there's some needs that get identified. You always talk about left shot D, right shot D, with the right shot D is coveted. You got to have a mix of sticks down the middle also. And what I was looking at today was the center depth for the Sabres. And I think they have a lot of talent there. It's well established. Kulich just played a whole year in Rochester at centerman, left shot. Okay. When you go deeper down the list, I have the Sabres having 9 guys that I would consider centerman right now. That includes Matthew Savoy, by the way. Savoy, when he got traded to Moose Jaw, played the whole ride there as a centerman. He might be a winger, but for this exercise, let's just call him the centerman. Okay. 8 of those 9 center prospects are left shots. So, if you're looking for tiebreakers, if there's things that you might want to see, if you're looking to round out your prospect ranks, a right shot centerman should be on the radar. There's a hell of a right shot centerman that would have been there at 11 that might not be there at 14. Okay, we'll talk about him because they probably missed out, I think, on that. And you can even make an argument that he may not even be there at 11, to be honest with you. I think he's a top 10, 9 talent. Okay, but no doubt a right shot C at some point. You want to get a talented centerman there. Because when you go down again, and I will just talk about guys that I think actually have a shot at getting a contract and playing. A lot of these guys don't even have contracts yet. Tyson Kozak, bottom of the lineup guy. He'll be a 4th line plumber if he ever ascends to the NHL. Left shot. Noah Ostlund, left shot. Ostlund's going to play. Savoy would be the only guy that's a right shot if you keep him as a centerman. All right. But right now, maybe we even just slide him out to wing for this exercise because you really see a need, I think, for some right wing depth in the prospect ranks also. Potapov can play both sides. A lot of these guys can play both sides. When I start talking about prospect wingers, I'm just looking at the shot they have. Isak Rosene's a great example. Okay. Left shot. Played the majority of the year on the right side. Start of the year on the left side. These guys can play both sides, especially when you can shoot the puck. It's good to have a guy like that on your off wing. But when I start going through, man, right wing, I'll put Potapov there. After that, it's pretty short. Okay. Let's just not talk about Savoy for a minute. You got Nadeau, spent most of the year in the Coast League. Heavy guy, little slow foot. good in front of the net, tipping pucks, good around the goal mouth. Not a guarantee that he's going to get up there. Sardarian, we'll see. Talented, a lot of talent. Moving on to a different program next year. We'll see what happens there. Aaron Huglen's probably going to walk. Plays a lot of center, by the way, in Minnesota right now. I have him still as a winger. Jake Richard, right wing, great shot, good in front of the net, big ass, set screens, all that stuff. Good hand-eye coordination. Not a most gifted skater right now.
Decent
I see a need for what's it?
Decent year at UConn.
Decent year, but not a guarantee. Not a guarantee, right? And certainly not a high draft pick investment in him. He was what, a fifth? So
I think he was a
sixth. So I'm looking at that really, and I'm sitting here saying, all right, man, there's a player there at 14. I'm not going D. I'm okay. Actually, I think the Sabres are pretty good with right shot defensemen right now. They don't have a lot of D. I only have 7 defensive prospects right now. Lindgren's out of the picture now. Albert Lacassen's out of the picture now. You're going to want to restock some D at some point, but it's not like this crazy need just because of the youth they have up on the NHL roster. You got some decent guys, Novikov and Ryan Johnson as left shots. The 2 guys that are also left shots that aren't here yet. Sean Cohane's going to be going to Harvard. 6'4", good skater. I think there's some potential there, actually. Norum Panaka, whatever. We'll see, right? 7th rounder, lottery ticket, go back to the queue next year, see if he can keep developing. On the right side, you're actually okay with Komarov and Maxim Sturbach, who I love. He will play in the NHL. No doubt in my mind. And Gavin McCarthy, right shot also. Going to be a sophomore at BU next year. Had a pretty good freshman year, played up a little bit, mostly played down the lineup as a freshman. They were, good team, loaded, everything else. So that's just kind of the lay of the land right now. You have 7 defensive prospects. You probably want to add a couple more. I would see him add a goalie at some point on day 2. Probably one of those 4th rounders would make sense. There's some good goalies in this draft. I love Ilya Nabokov, the Russian kid. Not massive, but athletic, just really good goalie. He's probably my favorite goalie in this draft. I think a lot of teams probably like him. But when I'm looking at that investment at 14, if they keep that pick, right? For me, it goes down to 2 guys. Honestly. So let's just kind of go through some of the players that I like in that front half of the draft. If that's cool with you. Love T.J. Ginla. No chance. Maybe a slight chance at 11, no chance at 14, right? Cole Eiserman. Interesting. Polarizing. I'm seeing all, like draft week is the same thing every year. There's people that know the players. There's a lot that don't necessarily. And you're seeing all the parroting comes on. You see all the same shit said about the same guys on every website that puts out a mock draft. And when you watch Cole Eiserman play, he competes like it's inconsistent. But the goal scoring, like if the Sabres are still at 11, I'd be sitting there banging the drum all day. Take him. Take him. Okay. Cummings made a good point today on Twitter, and I think he's right. I could totally see San Jose taking him. Bookends.
I was going to say the trade is interesting because that is sort of the sweet spot, I think, if he falls for Eiserman. And that along with Jerry Fortin's comment last week, I asked him if the nature of his prospect pool means maybe they would feel a little more open to taking a risk or looking for a different type of player, just maybe, trying to diversify. And he said he thinks the opposite, that he wants to minimize risk in the first round. He could be playing poker. Didn't strike me that he was necessarily. Does Eiserman fit a low risk profile? Maybe they would see him that way. Maybe, I don't know. But some of the inconsistencies in compete. The thing about Eiserman, and I'm with you. I've talking to our prospect guys at the Athletics, Scott Wheeler, and Corey Pronman, and I keep asking them. They're probably annoyed every time I see him. Like, what is what are we doing here with Cole Iserman? Like, how is this happening? Like, this guy is an A-plus goal scorer, and he's one of the youngest players in this draft. So the inconsistent part to me, or the roundedness of his game, I feel like that's something that, you should cut him some slack on, being as young a player as he is. The name of the
Doesn't
game is
turn
scoring
18
goals.
until August,
August.
29th,
Yeah.
end of August. He's almost one of the youngest players in this class.
So
Is it a risk? Dude,
it's all a risk,
dynamic
isn't
goal
it?
scorer.
You're
Everything's
outside
a
of the
risk.
top 10. You're outside of the top 10. There's a risk to all of these guys. There's a risk to any one of these picks outside of, maybe Celebrini is a pretty high floor type of prospect. It seems to be anyways, but risk with Iserman compared to some of the other guys, I don't know, because I see a skill that is the most valuable skill that you can have, right? Scoring goals. And so
He's been a goal a game player the past 2 years.
the shot
Scores
is
from all over the ice.
fantastic. At one point, he was getting criticized for shooting too much.
Yeah.
In some stuff I read, I'm okay with that mentality. He's a confident kid, I think. I think this year rattled him a little bit, but I don't know. He's the most interesting guy to follow to me, because I'm curious to see if the NHL view on him matches up to the media view on him, which is that he will be somebody who falls. But it does feel as if those teams at, what is it? It's Philly at 12.
Yeah.
And is it Minnesota at 13? So, or maybe, yeah, because Detroit's 15. So I think you're wondering at that point, San Jose paying a second rounder to move up, they're targeting somebody. So are they targeting Iserman, or are they targeting one of those defensemen,
Defenseman.
Sam Dickinson, Carter Yukemchuk, one of those two? I think the tier falls off. The next tier falls off after them on defense, maybe. So
Dickinson shouldn't be there for me, by
he
the
shouldn't
way.
be there.
Shouldn't be there.
Somebody's going to be there that we don't expect to be there. And
Yeah.
Kevin Adams just made it less likely that, he stumbles into a Zach Benson type of situation, but maybe not dramatically so. And maybe there's a player that they actually have their eye on that they think they can get at 14, which is teeing you up for your guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And just the last thing on Iserman, okay, by the way. I love the quote from that we saw in the year that Mike Bossy was drafted,
Yeah.
where they were talking about, hey, this guy's like an incredible goal scorer, doesn't play great defense. And I think it was Al Arbor said, I can coach a guy how to play defense. I can't coach a guy how to score goals. Okay. Cole Iserman scores a shit ton of goals. That's all he's ever done since I've known him as a hockey player. He's got NHL skating. He's got NHL strength. And I just don't see, I can't remember this ever happening. I'd have to go back. I mean, I'm getting old, my mind's I'm losing my mind here a little bit, I think. I don't remember a guy coming in the draft season being like consensus 2, 3, maybe even challenging Celebrini for that spot coming into the season, and then fall out into 11, 12, 13 and get in the teens. It's crazy. And he
While
scored a
scoring a
goal a
ton of
game
goals.
again
Right.
this season.
He didn't have a bad year. He didn't get hurt. He just kept scoring. So,
And look, man, when I look at all these other guys that leapt up from where they were, like TJ Ginla is probably going to go higher than Cole Iserman. You weren't saying that even 6 months ago. A lot of these guys, did these guys really rise as much? And it's typical paralysis by analysis. I think some of these guys, you're looking for the perfect human being for everything, every job. You look for the perfect hockey player. Guy can score fucking goals. Like at a clip that the National Team Development Program has never seen before. Just want to throw that out there. It's crazy to me. But that's not the guy, by the way. That's not the two guys. I've ground this down to 2 guys. When I say we're at 11, it's the same 2 guys, 14. And I'll just cut to the chase because we're almost an hour in already. Okay. That right shot centerman, I saw play a lot this year. Is very good from start to finish, has a complete game. He's a little bit more, he reminds me of Noah Ostlund, but he's a little bit bigger. He's a little thicker. He's got more mature resume playing against men at a similar age. It's Constantinius. I think that you had a thought that he might be there at 11, but even when I was texting you last night, I was like, hey, he's not going to be there. He's not going to be there. I just don't see how he should get out of the top 10, just given the completeness to his game, like we talked about, that everyone seems to love. Great player. I think you've dug into Hellenius quite a bit. But I think that he would be really a smart pick. And if Jerry Fortin wants to minimize risk, certainly there. Really good playmaker. Really good technical off the puck game. I like his game overall. I like the look of his. I think he's smart, play driver.
Competitive.
Competitive. Yeah.
Given that he's not necessarily a big center, but he's competitive and he's a good forechecker and has some of that edge that I think is important if you're going to take a guy that isn't necessarily, 6'2" or whatever. And big, fun personality, I think is, something that the Sabres do value, that piece of it, the person, the whole thing. And he was a lot of fun at the combine, confident and, funny and engaging. And, Kevin Adams is looking for those guys that love hockey, that, really are hungry to improve. And this guy struck me, in the brief, time getting to chat with him as one of those types of people. So he was a guy that, because of what you talk about it down the middle, maybe the need for another right shot center, and as far as minimizing risk, pretty solid, easy to pick guy if he was there at 11. I have a hard time seeing him get to 14, but one of the things Kevin Adams said when, after making the trade, was that he thinks after the first 6 or 7, it's going to be wide open. So is there a run on defenseman that we're not seeing that pushes some guys down? Does Yzerman go higher than we think, and that pushes somebody down? Would we have sat here last year and thought Zach Benson would make it to 13? So it's very much an inexact science. So I'm not ruling out the fact that he could be there at 14.
So, and by the way, I would take him if he was a left shot, and I just add another left shot. You know what I mean? It's not the allure is not that he's a right shot. He just happens to be a right shot. Good defensively, good on faceoffs. He didn't have Alexander Barkov type of under 18 year in Liga, but he had a really good one. One of the better ones that you're going to see. So he would make a lot of sense. I know there's D here. I just don't think that's, again, you're taking the best player available. I get it. I just don't know if the D that's going to be there makes sense. The player that I really think they're going to take, and I don't know, I think we have a good read on this. I really do. It's and people, if they were on Twitter today, I mean, as soon as they made that trade with San Jose, I was like, oh, hello, Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard. So hard driving, hard working, just hard on pucks. He adds to that size. He's a right winger. We just talked about it in my little scratch pad here. You need some right wings. Got some professional experience. Going to play for Skellefteå next year. What I like about this guy is just he's consistent. Energy, effort. And that's an element that you're missing a lot of in the prospect ranks right now. I'm looking for balance in the prospect ranks. Every year, kind of right about that. Just balance things out. For a team that has maybe some, guys that are below 6 foot, which, by the way, Cole Eiserman's not 6 foot. Doesn't help you with your size and length, right? Brandsegg-Nygaard does. I could have saw the Sabres looking at that looking at him at 11. Makes a hell of a lot more sense now that they slid back a little bit. If he's there, I'm thinking it's like a no-brainer move. When the stakes were elevated this year, late in the season, the playoffs, so he played second division for Mora this year. Game improved, got better, just was better and better throughout the year. Dude, I mean, that's kind of my guy. Hardworking, hard hitting, hard driving. Let's go all day long. I love the consistency, mature game. And I think he's got some offense, by the way.
He can shoot.
Got some offense.
He's not going to be, and he doesn't need to be, by the way, because when you talk about balancing out the prospect pool, he's maybe not the guy that's generating or creating the same way that other guys do, but you don't want him to, right? Like he's a good shooter, and maybe he's not going to be, creating his own space all the time. Maybe that's not his game, but you have so many, smaller skilled forwards that I think drafting a player like this makes a ton of sense. And all these traits you're using to describe him sounds like a player who's difficult to play against.
He is.
And I think it is important to point out that that's a big topic of conversation this summer, obviously. I mean, going back to early in the season, I feel like you and I have been talking about that. And Kevin Adams brought it up again today. But you can't just fix it with one piece, or you can't just fix it with free agent signings. Part of what I think they need to cultivate is more of that in their prospect pool and more of that balance that you talk about. Poltapov is a good example of a player who I think is, tenacious and hard to play against. Wahlberg certainly fits that.
Mm-hmm.
Other guys are competitive. Other guys are hard to play against because of their skill or their speed, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't have a lot of players
Dog on a
like this
bone,
guy.
straight ahead game, loves being F1 all day. Not flashy. I don't care. I don't care. That's the guy. I think that's the guy. So, all these things that ailed the team um, at the top club level this year, you're also missing a lot of those elements in the prospect ranks. We just talked about it. He kind of fixes that. And I start to feel a lot better about the wing depth and the mix of skills on the wings and different roles he can start to slot guys in. Once you get Poltapov over, Wahlberg's got a little more development. I love that Nygaard's going to be playing in Skellefteå next year. Odds on favorite right now on the betting boards in the SHL for next year. Good program. He's going to play high in the lineup. Great developmental opportunity for him. You can kind of, you can keep him there for 2 if you want to. You can kind of do what Awesome just did. But that's kind of where I'm at, man. And I'm trying to, when you look at a draft class like this, where there's a lot of uncertainty after 6 or 7, you could easily get into this thing where you're like boiling the ocean. This is clear for me anyways. And I've gotten this wrong before, but I've also gotten it right in the past with some of these picks and just like kind of connecting dots. And I think that, like, I don't know, I got a pretty good confidence level this year that this is a guy that they like anyways. Now, I don't know if they're going to, I can't sit here and tell you they're going to take him. But when you listen to Jerry Ford too, minimizing risk and all this other stuff, this is and Buffalo would love, like the city of Buffalo would love this player. Love this player. That's where I'm at. Other names, that you look at, I'm not thinking that Berkeley Catton makes sense. I'm not thinking he's even going to be there now that you slid down. I think he was more realistic at 11, but that's a player I really like. I really like him. I wish he was 6'2", but, and I'm the guy that always says
170, so he's not
yeah,
tiny, but
yeah. And I
he's
always say, Matt, it's not how big you are, it's how big you play. But it's sometimes you have to have a little bit more physical, attributes up front. So I know I'm stepping on you, but it's just like I'm in the prospect zone now. I'm rolling, man.
no, this is your game,
Um,
man. This is your thing. He's not as small as some of the other guys, but he is a smaller and kind of plays the slippery, type of game. So I'm kind of with you there in that I didn't love the fit, even though the player almost felt like if he got to 11, he'd almost be too good to pass up.
I think you're going to hear a lot about Seneca. He's not making it to 14, but like my hot take in this draft class, crazy riser, by the way. Long, still growing, just had like this massive growth spurt in the past couple of years. We're talking about Beckett Seneca. I like Michael Hage better than I like Beckett Seneca. That's my hot take in terms of first round draft prospects. Paige going to be going to Michigan. Every time you checked out USHL this year, you watched some plays, just out there making things happen. Got nice length, good skill, great, speed, skate. I think that he's the guy with that body type and just kind of game type that I kind of really, really like. Would I look at him for 14? That's when you start to look at a player like that. But for me, I think it's I do. I can't say it enough, and I'll just stop talking about it with Nygaard, but that's like the guy with a bullet for me. Can't speak for anyone else. Can't speak for you. Can't speak for the chat. What's the chat saying?
The chat likes it. The chat's a fan. He's high on Brian Cummings' board and a few other here that are a fan. I'm gonna throw some other names at you just to see what you think. And because what if he's gone, right? What if they get boxed into making a pick? I mean, Liam Greentree
Yeah, I
is
like him.
maybe another tier below, but what do you think of him, and maybe how he could bring some of those similar, kind of traits that we were talking about?
No, I like Greentree. He was a player I liked early in the year. He played on a shitty team, so it was really hard for him. But I think there's leadership capabilities there with him, power game that is really going to come around with him. He's probably, late teens for me. I don't know about 14. You know what I mean? Like if you're trying to really be exact. But yeah, it's a player, I could easily see. I don't know if he's got that same edge, like I don't want to put him side by side with Brandstad Nygaard because I think he's kind of a unique entity in that top 15. Nygaard.
Yeah, I think
Why
it's
you hearing? Why? What brings you to Greentree? Is there anything from your
similar
perspective or just
size,
yeah?
physical profile, and wondering where you see the drop off, because they're sitting at 14. Where is there another tier drop off here, and how steep is it?
Dude, that second, like when you start seeing a name like Emil Hemming, who might be in there like the early 20s, that tells you that the talent just keeps flowing down into the 20s for me. If like we don't know, like where is the other Norwegian kid going to go as a defenseman? Because to me, he's a top 20 player for sure. And I don't know if there's a guarantee that he goes in the top 20. That's another player that could slip maybe into the, early 20s. Talk about Stein Solberg. So I love that kid, man. Hard hitting. Yeah, he's probably mean, but you can get like mean. Like there's this kid Eichler who plays for Windsor. You can get a guy like that who just loves to hit and plays defense like on day 2, like middle of day 2. You don't need to go out of your way to add that element. But I don't know, drop off wise, it's hard to say, man, because I think there's a ton of talent that goes, it's pretty level. Like that whole not knowing that, like the unpredictability of this draft goes into like the 20s for me, man. It really does. The Russians, we don't know where the Russians are going to go. Even the ones that are projected to the top 10, Demidov should go 2, by the way. For me. And I don't know, are you hearing anything, by the way, at the top of the draft? Like, are you hearing like where, like who's locked in on who? Have you picked up anything on that? Have the athletic writers? I haven't really been paying attention today, so I'm not really. I'm
I know
hoping to
there's
learn
been a
from
lot
you.
of back and forth on the Blackhawks picket too from our guys there, and I think because there's been this late, I don't know if I would say push, but now that Demidov is over here and talking to teams and stuff like that, I think that has created a little bit of a wild card situation, because now his name's coming up more. He's interviewed with this team and that team, which you would expect, but it's still just creating a tricky situation. Same with the Ducks.
Mhm.
Seems like nobody has a good read on what the Ducks are going to do. And so Kevin Adams says, after the first 6 or 7, this could be unpredictable, but I think after Macklin Celebrini, it might be pretty unpredictable for a little while.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm just trying to figure out, like, I don't have a read on like where the first really like crazy pick is going to go. because you can make a case for 5 guys in every slot up through, 17. You know what I mean? So, yeah, the other one that I was thinking about too is I don't know if we're hearing anything on Lindstrom and like what teams near the top are thinking about his health. I think they're over it. I think that if team just likes him because he's another kind of, if he's healthy, he's a home run. If he's not, you're going to look really bad. Is this like a Nolan Patrick thing where these injuries is going to follow this kid around, or is he over it? And I don't think he's proven that he's over it. By the way, I've said it before on this podcast. I'm really nervous about the kid's health. I don't know why. I don't really have anything other than what we all know. I don't have any inside information, but I mean, I was never thinking that he's around at 11, certainly not going to be there at 14 for the Sabres. Be compelling though, It's almost like taking Grigorenko at 12 when they did back in 2012. It's like, maybe he can't skate, but man, if you got the same thing with Lindstrom, it's like, if he's healthy, home run.
Yeah. I mean, he was one of my favorites when I first started digging in, and then it became pretty clear pretty quick that he's not going to be there. He's not even going to, they're not in that ballpark without trading way up. But you never know. I guess you never know on draft night how things are going to go. And it's been some weird drafts the last couple of years, some out of left field picks that have thrown a wrench into things. And we may be talking about all this, and they may actually trade the pick. I don't know if this trade makes me feel like they're less likely to trade the pick or more likely to trade the pick. I'm not sure I have a strong read one way or the other. If anything, I guess I would say maybe it's less likely, but I don't think the value of 11 is that much different than the value of 14 when you're in trade talks. So it doesn't take them out of the running of any trades necessarily, but the fact that they were willing to make this trade now and not when they were on the board, not when they were on the clock on Friday night, makes me think that maybe they're feeling like they're going to be picking, but we'll see. Because the extra second also made me think, okay, that's another pick that you can use for an NHL player, because they have drafted 30 players in the last 3 drafts. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, as your hard drive is short circuiting over there with all this game tape, but they have 9 picks in this draft. Do they need to add 9 players to this prospect pool? Because at some point, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at some point I would think you reach a level where you have so many players that your resources as a development staff are spread thin. And, your slots, your prime development slots, right? Guys that are going to get prime opportunities, whether it's in the AHL or the NHL, you only have so many of those to go around. And so 39 picks over a 4-year span makes for a very crowded pool. So maybe that trade makes me think they're likely to, they're not done, put it that way. They can't be done. They just can't be.
Yeah, I can see them jumping back into the end of the first round too. If they play like a player like Basha, or we were just talking about Lindstrom. That kind of brings you to Basha, because they were on the same team, and he's a player that would fit. I think kind of fill some needs just from the effort, energy. He's got some griminess to his game, has some skill. I loved watching that kid this year, but he's another one. It's hard to pinpoint where exactly he's going to be. I'd be happy to keep a second round pick and hope that Serene, I mentioned him last week, take another Russian kid who can play pretty much every forward position. And he's a real pain in the ass. You can see the flavor of kind of what I'm looking for, a little heaviness, a little attitude. We've talked about it all year with what the Sabres need. That's exactly what I'm looking for types of players that I want to see them kind of pick up and add to the mix in the prospect ranks and see what they can do developmentally over the next 3, 4, 5 years. But for those that aren't familiar with Igor Serene, take a look at him. He played most of the year juniors this year in Russia, plays for in the Loco system, and real fun. Kind of a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get night to night in terms. He's got skill, but he's just kind of a bull in a china shop too. Seems to be like a real piece of work, in terms of like hard to play against and things like that. I like that. So,
You
yeah,
mentioned that that's your preferred flavor this year. I have a feeling that's going to be the preferred flavor of a lot of NHL teams. I think those guys are going to get if history tells us anything, the NHL, they like
yeah,
to be a bit of a copycat league, and the Florida Panthers just won the Stanley Cup with one of the hardest guys to play against in the league, and Matthew Tkachuk. Barkov is, very difficult to play against in his own way. Their
mhm,
physicality, their competitiveness is part of what won them the Stanley Cup. So I'm curious to see if that filters into giving some of these guys a little extra bump, right? Because they are, well, I agree with your point that the guys that are strictly heavy hitters, maybe, don't have some of the other attributes, those are guys you can find on day two. It's the guys that have the blend, right? The Lindstroms,
yeah.
guys like that, Aginla, that that's the hard mix to find these days. And that's where I think, some of those guys are going to see a little bump in value.
I wanna see those guys now though too. It's like you wanna see them when they're 17, 18 doing it, even though, like, they're all good offensively in their age group when they're junior players. If it doesn't translate, you're still getting a player that can skate, that has attitude, that's fearless, and you can easily slot them and have a little bit more versatility to work with if they're not a top 6 guy or even a bona fide third line guy. To your point about Florida, you know, we talked about it when if you're shopping for like a Lomberg, you got to get a couple of them. Well, you better start getting them in the prospect ranks too, because if you're really deficient, you got a ton of skill in there. If you're the Sabres, you're missing that. The closest thing they had, they traded. And by the way, Philip Cedarquist probably wasn't ever going to play in the NHL, but he was heavy. You know what I mean? Downhill player, like was a bull beneath the goal line. You got a little bit of that right now with Wahlberg, but I go up and down this prospect list, man. I don't see one guy that anyone's really afraid of. Like legitimately, like, oh man, I got to play that guy tonight. So get me some of that.
Yeah,
Michael
100%.
Brandsegg knee guard with a bullet at 14. Should be there. Should be there. And that's not a surprise too, by the way, because I think when I was telling you when I was on with Lindsay Mopper from Channel 2 last week, I was like, yeah, Iserman at 11, maybe even look at knee guard there for all these reasons. It makes a lot of sense. Let's go through the chat. We're already an hour 12 in. I'm tired, man. I woke up tired today. I fell asleep really early last night too, but if you could tell, and I didn't have coffee. I've noticed when I have coffee or when I'm sipping coffee in the podcast, I'm like, pow, 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 pow. You know what I mean? I'm not past two podcasts we've done. I haven't had coffee. You know what it is though, too? I don't know. The chat, is there any doctors in the chat? When you drink a lot of coffee, does that give you like a higher probability for kidney stones? Because like I'm all freaked out, man. My brother, so I'm the last of 5 boys. Now all 4 of my brothers has had kidney stones. So the last one that didn't have one had one 2 weeks ago, and he was like sending me pictures and pissing in a strainer and these little pebbles and shards. I was like, I don't want to deal with that, man. So I'm doing nothing but water and tequila.
You're not drinking any coffee at all?
A little bit, man. Very little
Not
bit.
even in the morning?
A very little bit. And it's messing me up. It's messing me up.
That's
Because I'm
tough.
like coffee. I'm the coffee guy, man. You know what I mean? Like even on the golf course, and even if I'm like shaking when I'm holding the club and it's messing up my golf game, I'm still out there drinking coffee because I like coffee. But I don't know. It's messing me up though, man. I think I should go make a cup. Just say, fuck it, I'll take the kidney stones.
Coffee's one I tried quitting coffee just as sort of an experiment in the fall, and I'm only like a cup a day, sometimes 2 cups, like depends, I tried going cold turkey and it was a rough few days, and I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this to myself, and I went right back to it.
Well, I drink like a pot, you know what I mean? Every day, normally, easily. And yeah, I've just cut way back, but it's definitely messing me up. The only other thing I have to
Quentin
report is
says his fiance is a doctor, and she says not really, but coffee does dehydrate you, and that's the biggest cause of kidney stones. So just drink lots of water. Which sounds like you're
Clinton
doing.
coming in clutch. All right. Clinton's coming in clutch. Good. The only other development I have is that I put this like a shag rug down in the back room of my house. I have this like little addition that was put on there. It's like kind of like a family room. Tito, okay, completely housebroken dog. He's 5 years old. He thinks it's grass. He pissed on it today.
That's
And
tough.
I'm really upset about this. I'm really upset about this. It's like, and he's doing it right in front of me. I'm down there just grabbing a water, and I look, and Tito just lifts. He's looking at me, smiling, lifts his leg, and just pisses. Man, he's not
It's a
sick.
big dog.
I mean,
That's not a. That's probably a fair amount of piss that ended up on that rug.
yeah, not happy about it. Hit the like button, everybody. Let's go through the chat. You got anything starred? Got anything going on?
I've mostly just been following. I always forget to star these chats.
Yeah, it's gotten to be like too much, you know. It's gotten to be too much. So it's just like I'm just like into the discussion, you know, and it's hard to just read the chat and talk through. We need a producer. We need a producer. If anyone wants to work for free, let me know.
It's too much in the best way because the chat is taking on a life of its own. What do we think of this player as a target? Ross Colton.
Yeah, I mean, is he going to be expendable? I mean, another player, you know, hard, clutch. I think that there's a reason that a couple good organizations have liked him because he's a good team player and he knows his role and he does it very well. Would he, you know, you need guys like that in the middle of your lineup? He'd be great. I mean, I like Ross Colton. I don't know what the acquisition cost is. I don't think he's not a free agent, is he? He's got a contract, right?
Yeah, he would have to be a trade candidate. This is another interesting point here, and one that I think will be a topic of conversation. If the Sabres, Brian Cummings says, if the Sabres let their UFAs walk and buy out Skinner, their three oldest players would be Clifton, Tuck, and Greenway. Also, three of their four guys with playoff experience, the other being Bo Byram. Still a potential issue with this team. Not just age, but meaningful experience. Like legitimate, meaningful experience. You see what Florida just went through. You see what these teams, Edmonton has gone through. Like that is a different beast. The last couple of months of hockey compared to what the Sabres have been playing for the last 13 years. Knowing what that looks like and finding somebody that can, lead your team in that way, I think is going to be pretty important over the next few days. And I don't think it's going to be the easiest thing to find necessarily.
And I know Kevin Adams keeps speaking glowingly about the upside of Peyton Krebs, but right now, Yuri Kulik, all of 20 years of age, I think has a very good shot, if nothing's done, of coming in and being on the opening night roster as a centerman. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it definitely doesn't help you become older.
No, it doesn't. And I'm glad you brought up Krebs because that is the one thing we didn't touch on from Kevin Adams' pre-draft availability here in Vegas. Another vote of confidence for Krebs from him, brought up unprompted, not totally unprompted, but asked about the center market and free agency. And Kevin circled it back to Krebs and, looking forward to seeing him take another step. And so as an RFA who's, due a qualifying offer in the coming days, that felt notable because you have potentially two center spots that you could change out if you wanted to move on from Krebs, but it seems like they're going to stick there. Whether he's the fourth center or the third depends on what other business you can get done.
Nate Chess is right-hand forward. This is Brian Cummings again. Did we throw up a Brian Cummings chat already? We probably have, but kind of an interesting one. If you give value to get him, give him a bigger role than Carolina did, which right-handed forward do you take off the PP, Tage, Tuck, Cousins, or Quinn, assuming that all of those players are here, right? You're not using any of these assets to get Nate Chess. Cousins.
Yeah.
Cousins.
I think so.
By the way, NHL awards coming in tonight, right? I think we saw Hellebuck at the Vezina, Quinn Hughes, right? Norris.
Quinn Hughes, Norris.
Is that what you said? McKinnon got the Hart. Who else?
Connor Bedard.
Yeah. Shocker. Any surprises in any of these for you?
Not really. Kind of chalk, it felt like.
Zach McCrell says Kucherov flat out robbed the Hart. 50 more points, the next guy in Tampa Bay. And I think that the definition of it is, right, the player judged to be most valuable to his team. Hard to argue against McKinnon, but certainly hard to argue against it by the definition of the trophy. I get what Zachary McCrell is saying. A lot of other stuff in this chat. This isn't good for the audio when I'm like, and I'm looking for it. That's the other problem I have with this. Some Reinhardt chat. There. By the way, I know I see people are like, get Reinhardt to come back to Buffalo. Not in this chat, mostly on like Twitter. You know what I mean? I think people in this chat get that Sam Reinhardt wants to not come back to Buffalo, only to play as a visiting 57 goal scorer. Does six? Oh, I think you have a take on this. So Jeff Luce, does $6 million for 7 years get a deal done for DeBrusk on Monday? I would say that definitely gets a deal done.
I think so.
DeBrusk. But what are you thinking about DeBrusk though? What I think you have an opinion on. Are you hearing what you told me? Is it your suspicion, or are you actually hearing maybe?
It's mostly a suspicion that DeBrusk, he's a Western Canada guy.
Yep.
And so,
played on
you have
current.
I think there's going to be some contenders in on DeBrusk, I think is what it comes down to. And you would probably need an offer like that one to get it done. As I was putting together my, depth chart projection, DeBrusk I initially penciled in as a big, the big ticket acquisition. But as I was looking at AFP and looking at some other teams that might be interested in him, just didn't feel realistic to me. Could be wrong. They could, swing for him. The other thing, if you get a guy like that, 7 years, $6 million, that guy's going to be in your lineup for a long time. And so you got to plan for that, right? With all these prospects and all the, all these other contracts you need to sign. That's a tough one.
I couldn't do 7 years.
That's a lot of term for that guy and even, $6 million. I'm curious to see where he'll land. I think if he's around, I think he'll be a little under 6 maybe, but it just feels like there's going to be too many other teams involved on him for Buffalo to have a realistic shot.
Likely. Jay Everett, this is kind of interesting because Matthew and I, again, did talk about this today. And I think during the day, not on this show. And this concept may have come up from one of us. Jay Everett says, listening to his interview, did you get the impression Kevin seemed a bit stressed out? Now, when I watched Kevin on Sabres Live today, I saw the media availability. He seemed in good spirits, but I also think he's definitely, just from the sheer time of year and the confluence of the draft, free agency, all this buyout nonsense that he's dealing with Skinner, I do think that he's feeling some stress. And I think it's part of the reason why maybe some of the answers were given. It was almost like, hey, there was a little more transparency today, just because I think stress, tired. And I do believe he's working it. But I think that he's got some stress for sure.
Stressed, frustrated. I think that's definitely fair to say. Like you said, he was in good spirits. He was, handling it all as you would expect. But this is going to be an incredibly stressful time of year for any of these guys, right? I mean, and especially Kevin Adams as he sits here entering year 5, having never made the playoffs as a general manager, knowing all the business he has to get done over the next few days if he's going to make this team a playoff contender in a tough Eastern Conference. Yeah, I think pretty much anybody would be stressed in that situation, but I think there's probably some frustration not being able to get some deals done and trying to figure out what's going on with Skinner. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's probably also why he mentioned, the Peterka, Byram, Quinn, Levi, all up for, all eligible to sign extensions, but not something he anticipates getting done because there's a lot else on his plate before he gets to those deals.
I am looking something up. There is a chat in here. I want to see if this is actually true here. I'll throw it up on the screen just because why not? We do the show live. That's what happens when you do the show live. Blue said Buchnevich isn't moving. Is that true? Did you hear this? Because I'm going Ron Burgundy. I don't believe it.
That I did not see. I don't know how strong.
It was almost Judge Smales, by the way. It wasn't Ron Burgundy. Let me see if I'm gonna look into this. I don't know if that's makes
I know
sense or
they're
something.
interested in signing. They've expressed some interest in signing him to an extension, but they're another team that is a little tricky to figure out when how much are they willing to reshape things. So
Yeah.
can you hold on to a guy like that and see how your season goes? Trade him at the deadline. I think that's what you talk about Kevin Adams and whether he's feeling the heat and all these things. That's what you're going to find is that when you leave yourself, one off season to try to get everything done, you end up in situations like this where, yeah, sure, in theory, Bushnevich should be available, but what if he's not? Mangiapane, what if you're on his no trade list? Any of these guys with no trade lists, you're going to be you might be in trouble. So that's where getting a little bit more done last summer, even the summer before, would have been helpful when they weren't spending very much money at all.
Kevin from the Southeast. I like to throw that in there. I want our people to know that we pay attention to them. We know where they're at. I believe that's right. If I'm wrong, Kevin, tell me. But I don't want to say the exact state you're in. Dox you fully, but Southeast Kevin says he's tired of hearing the Sabres were in on this. Get something done. Listen, I think that everyone loves chaos. Everyone loves trades. Everyone loves action. I think it's just really hard for Kevin Adams to get something done. Mark, not necessarily due to. I don't think it's not commentary on his aptitude for the job or anything like that. I think it's hard for him to get a winning scenario for him to make a trade, a winning trade, to win a trade. Here's my question for you, Matthew. I asked you this today. We'll do it here. Let's just do a hard shift here while we're still going through the chat. Sam Reinhart, 57 goals this year, wins Stanley Cup, right? Sabres traded him. The two assets that they got were Devin Levi, Yuri Kulik. Do the Sabres have to win a Stanley Cup for at least one of those guys on the roster, maybe both, preferably, right? To win that trade?
Yes.
Can they win the trade without winning a cup?
No, because the Panthers won one, right? Like
he scored the game-winning goal to win the cup.
That is winning, right? That's like, when Jack Eichel won the Stanley Cup, it's like, well, they won the trade until otherwise because they won the only thing that you're going for. So
if you haven't made the playoffs in 13 years and then these two guys become pivotal, like say Levi's your number one guy, Kulik becomes maybe he scores 50 goals one year for all we know. Who the hell knows? In 5-6 years from now. And this team, these are two pivotal parts that get the team in the playoffs for 10 years in a row. And even if they don't win, they still can't win the trade.
Well, then maybe we could talk. It depends on how Sam Reinhart and the Panthers do too, right? I mean,
okay.
I think there is probably a scenario where you could say, yeah, maybe that was a win-win trade. But the fact of the matter is the Panthers are never, no matter what happens, I think with Kulik and Devin Levi, I don't think the Panthers are going to be sitting there saying at any point, boy, wish we didn't make that trade. Because do they win the Stanley Cup without Sam Reinhart? Probably not, right? And I think I appreciate the question from Kevin. It was right that
that's about Kevin wants to he's like get something done.
Get something done
tired of hearing that
because
you're talking. Do something. Yeah.
I tend to agree, and I understand what you're saying. It is absolutely difficult. But again, some of that is their own doing by what they haven't done in previous off seasons. Some of it is their own doing by, frankly, not being a good team for 13 years, 4 of which have been under Kevin's watch.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's hard. Yeah, we're saying the same thing. Like,
it's hard.
I'm not making an excuse for Kevin Adams. I'm just saying I think it's like really hard for him.
I think it is hard
because of the situation that he had a hand in putting them in.
It's difficult because of these no movement clauses and no trade clauses. They're all over the league now, and it makes it hard to do business when you're a team that players don't want to necessarily go to. And that's where changing that perception is huge. It's why falling 1 point short a couple years ago was a gut punch because you saw what happened to the Bills when they made it to the playoffs. Bought them some time, bought them some goodwill with the fan base, bought them some reputational goodwill. It's like, okay, these guys got it done. They took a step back. They're attracting free agents. A little bit different in the NFL, but they don't have a problem getting players to come play for the Bills. They don't
Mhm.
have that issue because guys want to win. Now,
Yeah.
there's some guys I'm sure that don't want to play in Buffalo, even if they're going to get to play with Josh Allen. But the winning takes care of a lot of that.
Mhm.
This is a team that has not spent a great deal of money over the last few seasons. You could say it's because you have all these contract extensions coming up and all this, but you could have done a
Bullshit. They could
couple
have done it this year when Quinn was hurt.
you could have done a couple of short-term deals that wouldn't have impacted those extensions one bit. You could have got Garnett Hathaway last summer.
Mhm.
He went to Philadelphia. They weren't exactly a winning, you know, on track to be a winning team. Everybody thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league. Would he have signed here for some extra money? Guess we'll never know. Patrick Kane, you know, would he have signed for some extra term? Maybe he will
I
now. Maybe he's still
I
in
think
play.
he
But
I still think it's realistic. I think you gotta throw the money at him, and I think it's very realistic. I'm
point
expecting it to
being,
happen.
you could have done short-term moves to try to accelerate this thing a little bit.
Mhm.
It's not guaranteed that it would have worked out, but there were opportunities each of the last 2 years to make the playoffs. One year they come up 1 point short. Last year, nobody in the Eastern Conference seemed like they wanted that last playoff spot, but the Sabres had already fumbled it away in the first half of the season. So, yes, as we sit here, the week that Kyle Okposo got to raise the Stanley Cup, the week that Sam Reinhart scored the game winning goal, that Brandon Montour played a key role in this Stanley Cup run, 1 year after Jack Eichel got to raise the Stanley Cup, I understand the point that the chatter is making that get something done because this idea that, I mean, the Sabres got the extra draft pick, right? They got the fifth instead of the seventh because the Panthers won the Stanley Cup. I don't think
He
there's too many.
Swans thinks that we won that not we, but he says we, like me and the Sabres won the Okposo trade and they got the cup.
I, I mean,
I might agree
maybe.
with
Actually,
him.
it was different level of trade, though, right? A little bit different
Of
level of
course.
trade. I think the
Of course.
Panthers win the cup with or without Okposo, although he was the third guy to get the cup.
I I tried to
That
just
was pretty
knock you off the
interesting.
track there. You were on a really
But
good, like you were
but
cruising
it was
down
good.
that railroad track, man.
It's a good point. And, Brian Cummings tweeted this at me, I believe. I can't keep track of whether it was Twitter or comments of one of these videos, but him winning the cup means that he gets that $500,000 bonus. The Panthers have to pay that on next year's cap. Maybe that means one of these free agents they have shakes loose. So maybe Kyle helped the Sabres out a little bit. But the
You
point,
mentioned that before. Yeah, he maybe helping when he was getting in the lineup and they were sitting Lomberg for a little bit. Maybe it helped their
right?
chance of getting Lomberg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they clearly, he was important to them if he was the third guy to get the cup. That, I mean, I know he was old guy without a cup status on the team, so they were feeling good about that. But I guess my point is that, they did right by Kyle Okposo, right? That was the whole point of the trade. They weren't necessarily trying to, I guess you were trying to win the trade, but the main objective was to do right by Kyle Okposo. To an extent, there was a do right by Sam Reinhart. And, you know, I guess I am to the point where I don't necessarily care if you're doing right by guys because is that going to come back around at any point?
Yeah.
Is Kyle Okposo is a CAA guy, Pat Brisson. Uh, is he going to cut him a sweet deal on a free agent because he did right by Kyle Okposo? I don't think so.
No.
I mean, he squeezed him for every dollar on Owen Power, who's the same agency. So, you know, because you did right by Sam Reinhart, is that coming back around in any way? I'd like to see a little more ruthlessness, a little more, and maybe that means trading a player that's going to hurt, right? That some people will be like, "Whoa, everybody wants to trade Peyton Krebs or Henry Jokiharju, you know, these prospects they haven't seen yet." But on the NHL roster, people are all about Jokiharju or Krebs getting traded. Where's their
Every
value?
organization's got a Henry Jokiharju, and
Right.
so,
They
yeah,
watch them
I
play.
yeah.
I'm
Not saying they're bad players. I'm just saying what.
but if a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 13 years that needs centers doesn't want Peyton Krebs,
Yeah.
what is that? So you have to think about those things, and that's where maybe it requires a bold type of move from Kevin Adams, but this is the summer where something's got to give. You got to be able to push this team over the edge because you don't get forever. You don't get to just say it was tough to make deals. There's because this is now a body of work. This is now multiple off seasons that we're talking about. There are deals that have been made over the last few seasons, in season and off season, that other teams have upgraded their lineups. The Eastern Conference hasn't gotten any weaker. So I guess all that is to say that you got to, at some point, get sick of watching guys you've traded away raise the Stanley Cup. Like, that should eat at you more than you are happy for a guy. That should eat at you when Jack Eichel raises the Stanley Cup, or maybe not Kyle Okposo because it's, all feel good stuff, but those are guys you traded away. Those are guys that you couldn't make it work with. There's now, over the last 2 years, even Ryan O'Reilly wasn't, obviously a Kevin Adams problem, but over the last 2 years, there's almost a roster full of guys that played for this team that have a cup. So
It's crazy. It's
you just
absolutely
got to kind of
crazy.
push some of the feel good stuff aside, right? The feelings and go at, like, what does your team need and how can you attack that as aggressively as possible without being reckless, without getting taken advantage of because of the rest of the league knows that you're in a desperate position. That's the challenge. And that's why this franchise feels like, especially from a roster building standpoint, it's a delicate next week for them.
Well said, Matthew Fairburn. I don't have anything to follow up on that. I think that the chat would certainly agree with everything you just said. I know I do. And we have still a great deal of offseason ahead of us. Any closing words? We're hour 36 in. Well, it's been a while since we teed up the Athletic. You want to do your plugs? You had a story come out tonight, I believe, right?
I did. Some of the, news and notes from today in Vegas, and we'll have you guys covered throughout draft weekend out here. Whatever they do or do not do, we will have the news and the commentary on that. I believe you and I will be getting back together this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And whether that will be tomorrow night or early Saturday, I don't know that we've nailed that down. I think tomorrow night, more likely.
I
But
think we'll just be it's fluid. It's fluid. So I would say that as things happen, we can always hop on. It doesn't have to be an hour and 37 minutes every time we get together. We can do a quick hit. If Skinner's bought out, get on, confirm
it's
it, get the
funny
chat
that you say
going.
that because we say it doesn't have to be an hour,
I
37
know.
minutes every time we get on, but it kind of is. So, but yeah, to your point,
That's how I
is
felt about 15 minutes ago.
if something happens, we could also jump on here.
Yeah,
Tomorrow's,
of course.
there's a lot of time between now and when the draft starts at 5 p.m., but come on back over here and we'll have you covered. And of course, at theathletic.com/sabres, there will be some fun stuff as well throughout the weekend.
I love it, Matthew. Yeah, we'll see each other again very soon. It's very easy for us to hop on. Like I said, you can even do this from your phone, Matthew. I can hook you up with that also. I know you'd be loving doing that. Holding your phone up will look totally normal. Maybe we'll get you a selfie stick. But no, I think that's it. Hey, everyone, again, hit the like button on your way out if you haven't already. We appreciate it. Thanks everyone for hopping in. I'm gonna go have a cup of coffee. Just kidding. Actually, no, apparently I can, as long as I stay hydrated. On that note, for Matthew Fairburn on location in Las Vegas, Nevada, for the production crew, who I'm going to actually bring inside with some urine remover and have them get to work on Tito's piss mark on that shag rug. Can't believe he did that. I'm Chris Baker. Thanks for joining the fracas tonight. We'll see you again very soon.